The National Institutes of Health should improve its oversight of federal grant recipients who do medical research and whose scientists receive foreign funding. This is according to a new report from the Oversight Office for the Department of Health and Human Services.
Approximately 2/3 of the more than 600 biomedical research institutions recently surveyed by the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services had violated one or more disclosure provisions, the report says. Contributing editor at Vanity Fair and author of Bottle of Lies, the inside story of the generic drug boom, Katherine Eban joins us to discuss. Welcome to the show, Katherine.
Thanks for having me.
So, Katherine, what's the story here? What are the disclosures that we should be so concerned about?
Well, the question on the table is what kind of funding or monies are American researchers getting who are collaborating with overseas scientists and collaborating with overseas medical facilities and laboratories. What this review has found is that the sort of NIH oversight of this is a lot of Swiss cheese, basically, that there is a problem of transparency and visibility into what scientists are doing with foreign entities. Now, obviously, this has come up as a giant issue in terms of NIH grant to an American science entity, EcoHealth Alliance, which had relationships with the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. There's also a big question about Chinese theft of intellectual property from American researchers. So the idea is what you need is for America's top biomedical agency, the NIH, to have very good, strong, and robust oversight, and for American scientists to provide full visibility into their activities. And of course, this review has found that is not the case.
So is the issue, if the NIH is funding some research, American scientists are doing it, the NIH needs to know who else is funding this research, and then, who owns the property or the outcome of this research? Is that, and that not being disclosed is what we're talking about?
That's exactly what we're talking about. But also, there are questions about conflicts of interest. So if American scientists are getting money from, let's say, foreign governments or foreign laboratories, and that is not disclosed, that is a giant conflict of interest, and it's an undisclosed conflict. So, what are their loyalties at that point? What happens to the intellectual property, as you point out? These are really critical questions, especially when there are high risks and high stakes for a lot of this research.
Right, and what if we're collaborating with foreign-funded laboratories that do not have safety standards that are up to what we think they should be, and that you're saying that the NIH might have no idea if that's occurring?
That's right, absolutely. I mean, there are giant biosecurity questions here, and there is also a question of what is the research? What are they working on? Who's paying them to work on it? And as you point out, under what conditions is that work happening? The universities where American scientists work are also not apparently demanding sufficient disclosures from their own faculty about that. The NIH is not training these scientists appropriately to make these disclosures. So I think, COVID-19 has basically surfaced this whole set of problems about how science is done in a globalized world and what is disclosed and to whom.
And is it because the NIH doesn't want to know the answers to these questions? It doesn't want to start setting norms where they're being overly cautious or overly interfering in the research scientists want to do? Is it because they're ideologically disposed to that kind of we cannot hamper free minds or something like that? Because in a lot of other scientific fields, right, there's very careful oversight in place. If you want to conduct a psychological study, something of that nature, you have to have all these, you have to dot all your I's, cross all your T's to make sure you're not, compromising patient safety or FERPA or something like that. And that's not what's going on here.
Right. Well, I mean, I can't speak for the NIH, but my sense about this is, as a giant institution, they've kind of just lost sight of the ball. The oversight is not sufficient. It's not robust enough. It's not updated enough. There's not enough vigilance. So I think that this has just lacked attention. And perhaps it lacked attention because maybe it didn't seem as critical at a certain moment in time, but it's hard to imagine anything more momentous in this day and age and at this moment than what American scientists are doing in foreign laboratories.
Right. I said FERPA, but I meant HIPAA, just to go ahead, Bree.
I recently interviewed economist Jeffrey Sachs, who is the chair of Lancet Science Journal's COVID research team, and he was explaining, and he's written about this recently, it's been covered by The Intercept and elsewhere, that he was surprised by the amount of pushback that came his way as someone who wasn't ideologically committed to the idea of lab leak theory, but he found his investigations, which he had been charged with, were thwarted, that he was receiving a lot of pushback from scientists as he was trying to get more information about the kind of research that was being done at American facilities, and that this is ongoing even all of this time after the emergence of the COVID pandemic is really galling so much, it's galling that it's even rattling relatively establishment figures like Jeffrey Sachs, as opposed to some of the other people who've been able to be dismissed as more fringed in this context. Do you think that now, after your reporting and some of these stories that have come out more recently, there is more attention to it and there is more pressure on these stateside institutions to offer up more in the way of disclosures?
Well, there's absolutely more attention to it. I mean, but one thing that this pandemic has revealed is that scientists, I don't speak for all of them, but a number of them are so hostile to scrutiny and oversight. They do not want regulation. They do not want to have to disclose or report certain things. And they have argued vehemently, often viciously on Twitter, that their conduct has been unassailable. And I think from a lot of reporting, there's a question about that. There's a question about the level of transparency. I mean, that's been a striking feature of the debate over COVID origins, is a lack of transparency from our science institutions, our scientific leaders, and our top scientists.
Yeah, I don't know that you can claim transparency or claim that you are doing everything above board when you won't just, open the kabuki and show people what it is that you have been up to. I think in this context, a lot of the suspicion is exactly because there has been so much resistance to just explaining what's been going on in the labs.
Yeah, I mean, what has been revealed is a real split screen. A lot of denials about scientific activity, only to find out through FOIA and other mechanisms that, in fact, there have been questionable activities going on. There has been dangerous research going on, funded by the NIH, that has not been readily disclosed. And it's fallen to investigative journalists and, FOIA sleuths to try to figure out what the truth is.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Katherine.
Thanks for having me.
And we will have more Rising for you after this.